throw. One-on-one, Davis has it. Touchdown! Carolina wins! Carolina is the Coastal Division champion! Javonte Williams to the left of Howell. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howell looking, standing tall, lets it go, man there! Touchdown! Touchdown, Carolina! The pistol, Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson, he tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted! Surratt intercepts it! Holy cow, Carolina's gonna win! And off to Javonte Williams again, pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another! Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back, pressure coming, Aguilar floats it up, incomplete! No flags! Head on back up the mountain! Carolina wins it in double overtime! Loftus, out of the shotgun, throws to the end zone, incomplete! Incomplete! The bell belongs to us! Carolina wins it 47-45 in double overtime!
Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, with you guys, as always, here on a Friday night. It is the start of what is going to be a big weekend, potentially, a podcast here on the football side of things. And we're just getting you prepared by jumping you in with a look back at ACC Kickoff from yesterday. Really, tonight is mostly going to be the audio. I know in the description I put that we were going to get to the SEC stuff. We may touch surface level on that. We may also touch surface level on some of the other news. But we may be doing a full podcast about the SEC. We were just discussing it pre-show. That's why we are a little bit late to the air. And we said, hey, that might be one that we have to do just a full pod on because it is just that important. So we know that we are talking about that behind the scenes for you guys. And we are preparing for you possibly another podcast here. But tonight, the focus is mostly on what was said at ACC Media Days. What did Bill Belichick and the guys, what did they say? Jordan Shipp, Will Hardy, Thaddeus Dixon, and Gio Lopez. Even though Gio Lopez did not speak to the local media, he didn't have his little session with them like everybody else did. He didn't have his time on the stage during the main portion of the day. He was a part of ACC Media Days. He was there in the breakout room, so there was plenty of stuff from him. There was, some stuff that I did not post to social media, but I will tell you about here on this edition of the podcast. So make sure that you guys are tuned in for all of this here tonight. Let's start with Bill Belichick, and I think the first thing that you want to start with is him on the ACC network talking about being a part of the Carolina community, and it's something that he has fallen in love with so far.
Team, you're a part of every team, and that's what it's felt like at Carolina, whether it's the men's, women's lacrosse team, men's, women's basketball team, baseball team, which had a great year, and so forth. Just following those teams around, being part of the community, it's been awesome. And so I've always wanted to coach in college, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to be at a great school like Carolina with great leadership from Chancellor Roberts and then the alumni and the support that we've gotten since we've been there.
So, yeah, he was talking a little bit there. That soundbite actually got messed up. It got paused in the middle of the soundbite. But he was talking about how, when he came to Carolina, he was, this isn't 100% new to him. He's a guy that's been around college football because his dad was around college football. His dad was a college football coach for Navy, and event, previously at Carolina, was a coach as well before he ended up at Navy. And so he got used to being around college football. But he said that really connecting with the community was the big thing. And that was something that he talked about here. And, it makes a lot of sense. We've seen him sort of become a part of the community as it's gone along. I think that, one of the things we wondered, would he sort of embrace being a college football coach, or would he be a guy that focused on just his program? When you're a college football coach, you have to go around, you have to go to some of these other events, you have to be involved with the athletic department as a whole. And I think, we've seen so far, he's been very involved on that side of things. We saw him, at some baseball games. We've seen him at other events, gone to some basketball games as well. Of course, that was part of recruiting, but it seems like he is embracing everything that goes into being a college football head coach, something that I think we sort of questioned when he originally took the job, because we thought he might be looking for that quick path back to the NFL.
I think it helps that Carolina is still a small college town. It's not in a big city. He's not coaching in in Austin or some of these other places where there isn't the inclusivity, if you will, of where you're at. He can still be isolated and still be in his own little bubble in Chapel Hill. But I also think he understands the importance of being present while being in college. It's different from the NFL where, at Carolina, 9 times out of 10, the basketball coach is maybe the more identified coach on campus. That's not the case right now when you've got Bill Belichick on your campus, the greatest NFL coach of all time. He takes over the status of a guy like Hubert Davis, but you need to be out in the community and you need to show support for these other programs. And so it hasn't been surprising to me, because I do think he understands that aspect of it. It's why you saw him, at basketball games recruiting, but there were other games where he showed up just to be there to support. We know he has a connection with the lacrosse program. He's going to be at lacrosse games. You saw him at the baseball weekend when they lost in the Super Regional to Arizona. So I think he understands the responsibility that he has. No, he's not a guy that's going to be out at every single sporting event, but he will show up and support the other guys, because I do think it is important to him, because it's probably something he saw his dad do when he was growing up on the Naval Academy, seeing their program be involved in supporting the other programs on campus. And I think it's going to be kind of cool to see when he shows up and when he pops up, because if he's taking time away from working on his program, then it's going to feel like a big event. So it's going to feel like a bigger game if he shows up to a basketball game, a baseball game, a field hockey game, or a lacrosse game. So it hasn't been surprising. It's been kind of cool just seeing him show up and support all the other sports on campus.
Yeah, and I think that's something you can expect to see from him moving forward, because, you talked about it. Lacrosse, he's going to be looking for guys that could potentially play on his team. He's got multiple guys, and we're going to continue our position breakdowns, but we told you about Gary Merrill, a guy who's going to play lacrosse for the team, for the university, as well as be on the football team. There is Paul Barton, who comes over, was exclusively a lacrosse player, now is coming over to play a little bit of football in his final year of college eligibility. So I think that's something that you're going to see, is that there is going to be that meshing of the other programs on campus, and especially with that lacrosse program, which I think he cares about so dearly, especially with there being a friend and in the coaching position over there that he is known for a long, long time. So I definitely think that's something that you need to get used to. Well, now, okay, let's get to the actual team and the on-the-field stuff, the stuff that we want to talk about. And the first thing was the most obvious question that needed to be asked, and it was the second question that was asked to him in the breakout session, was about the quarterback position. This one on Gio Lopez being QB1 and the quarterback battle.
Gio being here at Media Day, is he going to be the de facto QB1, or is there still a QB battle?
Well, again, neither player took any snaps for us this spring, so it's competitive, and then we have 2 freshmen. We'll let them compete, see how it goes. I can't control how anybody plays. We'll just give them the opportunity, put them out there, and let them decide. They'll decide.
So there you go. So that's pretty much the answer that we expected from him. The question that was being asked was the one that I think we all kind of had. is the fact that Gio is here, is that basically saying to everybody that he is the de facto starting quarterback for this season? I asked Gio Lopez myself when I got back over to him after I was initially there with him when he started the breakout session. I asked him right out, I said, have they told you that you're QB1, or have they told you how they are going to divide up the reps? And he says that he has not been told that he's QB1, and he has not been told how they will divide up the reps in camp. So they are wanting everybody to believe that there is a legit quarterback battle here. We talked about it on the last edition of the podcast, that we think if there is a position battle here, we differ on who we think the actual quarterback in that battle is going to be, that's going to be pushing the hardest for those reps. I believe it's probably the veteran Max Johnson. I think you still believe that it's probably going to be Bryce Baker because of the talent. But I do think that we need to acknowledge that from what they're telling us, at least, this is going to be a quarterback battle at the start of fall camp.
It is, but I saw where Inside Carolina put out something earlier this week where this is not going to be a battle that will last into the opener. Belichick and the offensive staff, they will be committed to figure out who their quarterback will be at least a week out from the opener. And it does help them, I think, that they play on Monday as opposed to Saturday. They have 2 extra days of preparation as that battle does work itself out. I think Gio Lopez is going to be given every opportunity to submit himself as the starter. I think they took him to media day yesterday to give him see how he would handle that experience, that environment, the hoopla that comes around with having to do so many media requests. Now, Carolina didn't do nowhere near as many media requests as virtually every other school that made their trek through Charlotte this week. But nonetheless, like, that was maybe the first step. Okay, was how do you handle being asked questions from the media? And I would listen to his whole breakout session. There's a calm confidence that comes out of Gio Lopez, and I think he's confident he's going to be the guy to win the job. So, be interesting to see. I wonder if that's something when we get into camp next week, and we hear from Belichick, we hear from coordinators. How open will they be about that battle? Like, is that something where we're going to be relayed information about, or is that something where we're not going to be told until they name a starter whenever they release a depth chart? So the quicker whoever wins the battle, the better, because you really start installing and putting your offense around him. But I guess I'll say right now what I said the other night. When we take the field that Monday night, I would be surprised if Gio Lopez is not the starting quarterback for Carolina to begin the 2025 campaign.
Yeah, I don't care what they tell you. There is not a quarterback battle. There's not a lengthy quarterback battle here. You don't bring one of the guys that's competing for the job if everybody's going to be competing when you get to fall camp for the starting quarterback job. That's not where it's at. Now, I get what Bill Belichick is saying, and it makes a lot of sense. Neither him nor Max Johnson took snaps with the team in the spring. So you can't just hand the keys over to Gio Lopez and say, hey, man, you don't even have to compete for the starting job. No, you need to see him actually get out there and compete. You need to see that he understands the offense, that he's been able to pick up some things here during the summer. But at the same time, I find it hard to believe that you have a guy that comes with you to ACC Media Days and you're going to turn around and tell that guy, yeah, you are not the starter. We're going to roll with a guy like Max Johnson or a guy like Bryce Baker. Unless the only way I could see it, to me, is if Bryce Baker came out and is all of a sudden a completely different guy here at the start of fall camp than he was back in the spring. And is that possible? Yeah, it's certainly possible, because he's a guy that we've heard a lot of the same things that we heard about the previous quarterbacks that were all-time greats at Carolina. Sam Howell, Drake May. It's a guy that's there, first guy there, always watching film. He's a guy that is working on his craft as much as just about anybody. So I think that would be the one scenario where maybe you have a legitimate quarterback battle, but I don't think that's ultimately what is going to play out. I think you will see Gio Lopez as the starting quarterback. So when it comes to Gio Lopez and what he's doing, Jordan Shipp was asked about him and how Gio Lopez has adjusted to the playbook, knowing that, right now he's really only being able to study the playbook. The coaching staff is not being able to coach him on the field. Here's what the Tar Heels wide receiver had to say about the new quarterback and how he is handling the playbook.
Adjusted very well. Gio has there's a lot of times, like I said, we'll watch film together. Me and him will watch film one-on-one. We'll watch film with other receivers, and we'll watch film with the coaches as well. And in terms of learning the plays, he processes stuff so quick, and then he's able to call stuff out, and he's like, well, if you see this is what I want you to do. And now it feels like we're going back and forth, and not really like an argument, more just like two football players just talking about what we both want to do. Because I need him just as much as he needs me, and I feel like we balance off each other perfectly, and we just the same thing with Max as well. Really, same thing with all the quarterbacks. A lot of us, we all watch film together, from Bryce Baker to Max to DJ to Torrey to everybody. Gio being there, all of us would be just watching film together. We like to do stuff as a group instead of being singled out. So I feel like he's grasping the playbook well, because a lot of us are helping him out as well. But he's also pointing stuff out to me that maybe I didn't recognize in the spring. He's like, well, if I see this, maybe I want you to do this, and I'll be like, that makes sense, and I can do that.
So you love to hear at the end the stuff about him pointing things out in the film, him saying that these are some tweaks that I would make, even within the scheme, some of the plays that I would do. I think he's learning this scheme as good as he can. And I think, one of the reasons why we're probably apprehensive about him and we're saying, okay, is he going to be able to learn the playbook that quickly, was because we're scarred from last year when Carolina brought in Jacoby Criswell. And remember, Mac Brown said, hey, he needs time to learn the playbook. It's not going to be something that we can teach him in fall camp. I think with Gio Lopez, it's a little bit different. This staff believes that he's doing the work in the offseason and that he's going to get himself into a position where he's going to be able to come in and hit the ground running when you start fall camp.
Let's also not skip over the fact the film he's watching is primarily NFL film. It's not college film. He talked about how he was watching stuff, from when Freddie Kitchens was in Cleveland, and so you're watching him learn and study and try to process an NFL offense. So that it's even I guess more complex, and just in terms of maybe. The terminology and the schematical aspect of it. But I think it speaks volumes about the fact that Carolina believes in him enough where they went and got him in the spring transfer window, understood he wasn't going to have the amount of reps that maybe some other guys would have had he transferred in earlier. But he's doing everything that he can do right now to position himself to be the guy next year or for this upcoming year. And I think there's a leadership that's already being established, as you heard him talking there, or as you heard Jordan Shipp there talking about, where they're talking through things and really getting that communication down off the field, that chemistry to where a guy wants to be positioned, how he wants the football thrown to him, and stuff like that. And so I think that's stuff that you have to appreciate about the players. We heard a lot about, when Mac Brown was here, when he said, the best teams are player-led teams. But there was always a leadership void that existed, and that's really why those seasons went sideways down his last couple of years here in Carolina. That's not going to be any different with Bill Belichick. He's still going to say that, hey, the best teams I've coached were led by players that were great leaders. You're seeing some leadership take or come to the forefront right now, and that's a good sign for them when they go to camp next week and they put the pads on, because they might be in a better spot. Even though Gio Lopez came in later, kind of like where they were last year when they brought in Jacoby Criswell in the middle of the summer.
Yeah, I think they definitely are in a much better spot. I think they believe that they have a guy that can come in and can really jump right into the offense and be successful. You mentioned that they're watching film of a lot of the stuff that Freddie Kitchens did at the NFL level, and the hope is that this offense is going to look different than what it was in the bowl game. And so far, from everything that we've heard, it is going to look completely different. That includes Jordan Shipp. I asked him right out, how is this offense different from what we saw in the bowl game?
It's just going to be unique. We're doing a lot of different stuff, a lot of different personnel, a lot of different motions and shifts, and don't want to spoil it too much, but it's not going to be the same as last year in the bowl game.
And so I think he's not going to give much away, and I appreciate that. Clearly the guy that was coached up the best. You could tell in his answer when he was talking about Gio Lopez, and then he circles back around and says, hey, we were all watching film. I've watched film with Max. I've watched film with Bryce Baker, with Arturo Newkirk, all these different guys. You could tell that he's been coached up by the staff to make sure that he is mentioning everybody just so that he covers all bases. But really, I think the offense is going to be completely different than what we saw in that bowl game. They had a month to prepare for that bowl game. But again, you had a roster that was completely different. This is a roster now that you feel more comfortable with. I think Freddie Kitchens at the time was, unsure of what exactly he needed to show Bill Belichick, what exactly his role was going to be on the staff moving forward. And so I think that the game plan might have been a little bit conservative, also to not show anything for the next year if he knew that he was going to be the offensive coordinator for the team, and you're playing a bowl game that frankly was, I mean, let's just admit it. It was a waste of time. That bowl game was absolutely useless for Carolina football. I mean, there were some guys that maybe, ended up sticking around on the roster because of the way that they played in that bowl game. But I don't think that it was that was the majority of the reason why certain guys were kept around in Chapel Hill. I think they went back, they evaluated the tape on a lot of guys. So I expect this offense to look completely different, look a lot more pro style. And I do think that one of the other things that you heard is that this is going to be an offense that is going to adjust to a lot of what the opponent is doing. It will adjust to the weaknesses of the opponent. And the hope is that not only will the running game be a strength for Carolina, the passing game will be a strength, and it can sort of interchange from week to week.
I think that's what I'm most interested and excited to see is how does this offense adapt week to week? Because when Belichick was at his peak with the Patriots and he had Brady, you would think that all they did was stand back there and throw it 40 times for 400 yards. And there were some weeks that that's what Tom Brady did because Tom Brady could do that. There were also some weeks where if they were going to be against a team that was deficient against stopping the run, they lined up and they played smash mouth football. They ran it 25, 30, 35 times for 180-plus yards, controlled the clock, and won games that way. That's something that, quite frankly, we haven't seen really since Larry Fedora showed up. We have seen this program, because they've been so deficient defensively, chase points and play in shootout after shootout after shootout. I don't think that's going to be the case this year for Carolina. Where there'll be games where they get in a track meet and they got to win maybe 38-35, 34-28. Yes, this is college football. Those games are going to happen. I do think, though, in a perfect world, they will be wanting to play games 24-21, 21-17, maybe 28-24. And so I think this offense will be adapting week to week because they will identify the weakness of the opponent and try to exploit that as much as possible. So you could see a week where Gio Lopez throws for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. But the next week he throws for $150 because they're running the football, 60% of the time. So I'm really interested to see what this offense looks like. Just because it's going to be pro-based, they're going to line up in the I formation. No, they're still going to be in the shotgun. I think you would imagine probably 85, 90% of the time. There's going to be the RPO element because that has also made its way to the NFL as well. I think the pro-based stuff will be in the terminology and the schematical stuff that they do as they try to exploit these defenses on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, and I think what you can expect, if you're wondering what the offense is going to look like, just go look at what Michigan has looked like for the last few years, and I think that's very similar to what you're going to see. Jim Harbaugh, I think, was a guy that was pretty modern, but combined – some of the pro style stuff that you would expect to see Carolina do and put those elements into a more modern offense where the team was in shotgun a lot. I mean, the team won a national championship for a reason. because they were able to be that pro-style system at the college level. I think that's what you're going to see from Carolina, a lot of that kind of stuff where, yeah, there will be some under center, but really the pro-style aspect of it is that you're hoping to be a group that can, that has its own strengths for sure, but really plays to the weaknesses of the opponents that you're playing. That's the hope that Carolina, or that's what you hope Carolina's offense looks like this year, where, yeah, we saw last year, Carolina was an offense that was so run-based that teams, as the season went along, started to figure out all you have to do is be able to is just let their run game have some moderate success, take it, eliminate it from being a huge day from Marion Hampton, and put the pressure on Jacoby Criswell to win the game. This year, I don't think Carolina is going to have those limitations, and I think that's what's going to open up this offense so much more. And yeah, you're hoping that this defense is going to be a lot better, where you won't have to be on the field as long as Carolina, or as much as Carolina has been the past few years with their offense. But you'll have to wait and see. Speaking of the defensive side of the ball, well, let's go. Actually, let's talk about the roster as a whole here. And let's just talk about the turnover, because one of the things that Bill Belichick mentioned, this was in his breakout presser that was with the local media. This was before he went up to the stand. This was before they went into the actual breakout room. There was a small session where only certain media members were allowed in. And he was asked about the roster, turnover. He said there's 70 new guys that Carolina has on the roster this year. And so when he gets into the full breakout room, somebody asks him right out, look, you got so many new faces on this roster. How do you navigate having that many new guys, especially with the fact that it is going to be such a short turnaround here with fall camp?
Yeah, well, they've been training together. We just haven't really played football. So, but yeah, you're right. It's a little bit of a challenge. Certainly, we'll have team building activities and things like that, where you kind of get to know your teammates and build some camaraderie and trust. But on the field, it comes from earning that trust from your teammates and being dependable, being where you're supposed to be, so they can be where they're supposed to be, having good communication, working together. A little bit like a military boot camp or training camp, where you learn to work with your teammates pretty quickly, or somebody else is working with them. So we'll see how it goes, but it's not that different from the NFL. As I was saying in there, we a lot of times had 40, 45 new players, 35 new players, whatever it was. It's a lot, but again, time together. If it's really important to you and they work hard at it, then we'll see improvement quickly.
So how concerned are you about this element? Because I do think that this is one of those things that was really interesting that was brought up about this aspect of how many different guys Carolina brought in, especially the key contributors that came in through the transfer portal back in the spring.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's never easy to project when you've got 70 new players on a roster going into a new season with a first-time head coach at the college level. But this is where you're hoping the NFL experience of him and that coaching staff really pays off and really shows up in a big way. Because that's quite frankly what Carolina in year one is banking on. We can talk about how easy the schedule is and how manageable the schedule is. None of that matters, though, if the kids aren't being developed and you're putting the guys in the right position to make plays. What I find interesting, and I think this is something that we'll be interested to see, does Belichick use his platform moving forward? He talked about, sometimes the NFL, you had 40, 45 new players, but you had a training camp and you had a preseason to really get to know your team before you ever stepped out onto into a game that mattered. You don't have that in college. You just have training camp. And so I wonder, because he was asked about the playoff, and he said he would wait to get a little bit more experience before he commented on how we determine the national champion in college football. We have seen coaches start to push for, a spring game where they can play a different school. And we've seen, where they were talking about OTAs maybe coming to college. I wonder if what Belichick could spearhead is there being a preseason at the college level. because as long as the portal is around, even though you have guys that are getting paid, you're still going to have roster turnover year over year. Is it going to be as dramatic as it was this year? You hope not. Outside of maybe when you have the next coaching change, like I think that's always going to be a part of it. I wonder if that's something where he'll use his platform and say, hey, it would make our product better if we had a chance to play a game before we got into the regular season when we're trying to evaluate 40, 45, or in our case, 70 new players. So, part of it was necessary. We kind of talked about that when he got hired, that he was going to weed out some of the guys that he didn't feel like could play at this level. Some of these guys he added were just literal depth pieces just so they could have enough bodies on the roster to survive a 12-game schedule. And so we'll have to see how it all shapes up because, 70 is a pretty big number, but it's a number that's going to be attached to this team if they win or if they lose.
Well, the thing it's scary about it is the fact that you bring in so many key contributors, especially on the defensive side of the ball, that came in during the spring window. So, yeah, this is going to be their first exposure to the field is going to be when they get into fall camp. They're going to have to learn things very quickly. Yeah, you've studied the playbook in the offseason. You've worked through some player-led practices, but it is going to be different when you actually step out there and you're going through these practices. You're having to learn certain things that the coaching staff is trying to teach you, and you have to be preparing at the same time for TCU within a month. That's the thing, is that with training camp, even with NFL training camp, it's a little bit longer. So that's where you look at it and you say, okay, it's a little bit scary. That's why I think early in the season, it's okay to look at this team and say they're going to need some time to grow. This is not necessarily going to be a finished product when Carolina steps on the field against TCU. That's why I don't think it's the craziest thing to think they're going to get beat by TCU. And I know people will say that's, look, we're at home. That's a team that, should be middle of the pack in the Big 12. I think they're going to be a little bit better than that. But some people have pushed back on that. Even still, I do think that you need to have some patience with this group. At the same time, 70 new people, that's a lot, but that's something that you will never hear ever again. There are certain things that you saw this offseason that you're never going to see again. You're never going to see roster limits expand from 85 to 105 again. That's why Carolina has so many new faces, is because they brought in a bunch of guys to fill that 105-man roster. They want to make sure that they are deep enough. And some of these guys that they brought in, look, these guys are on the roster because they're in place of what would be walk-ons. I mean, he literally admitted that in his press conference. I think that was in the one that he did with local media. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I believe it was. That's where that 70 number comes from. And the other thing is 70 is across the board. So that means that there are 70 guys that are new to this roster, but there were a decent amount of them that were in spring practice with them. I do think that the good news is that you're already seeing a guy like Gio Lopez, who hasn't even taken a snap, emerge as a leader. You're seeing a guy who has taken snaps with this staff on the field during practice in Thaddeus Dixon become a leader as well. So you're seeing some of these transfers already becoming leaders on this team. That's what you're hoping to see. And now, I mean, look, it's going to be tough. There's no doubt about it. That lead up to the season is going to be crazy. But I'm going to tell you, you go back to the first year when Dion was at Colorado. Remember, they played in their opener. Nobody expected them to win their opener. They come out and win. Who did they play, by the way, in that opener? TCU. So I think that could be something that works in Carolina's favor. You never really know what can happen. It'd be a weird coincidence. But I do think that it's not unheard of for teams to come out with that many new guys and jump onto the scene and immediately compete. So I don't think it's impossible. What about you?
No, I don't think it's impossible either. And this is because, one, you've got the greatest coach of all time. You've got a staff that's got experience doing this. And, Michael Lombardi kind of said this. It was a few It was like right before he went radio silent back during the summer. This is going to be a team, no matter what the win threshold ends up being. And I have really come into the idea where I think 8 and 9 wins are definitely on the table. But this is going to be like a team that gets better week to week, game to game, month to month. Like the team that we see on Labor Day night will not be the same team that we see in October, and will not be the same team that we see in November. And will be a team that I think is going to win its fair share of games, but will also be improving week to week and not just be a team that's taking advantage of a light schedule. Like I do think, kind of like what we talk about like in basketball, where you want to play your best basketball in February going into March. I think this team is really built to be playing its best football end of October going into November, which is refreshing because that wasn't the case under Mac Brown. Under Mac Brown, this team really peaked in late September, early October, and when the games really started to matter, they started to fade down the stretch. And so it's a lot of new faces, but it's not like Carolina is completely deprived of talent either. Like, yeah, it's fair to say we don't know a whole lot about this roster, and that's true. But with some of the reinforcements they brought in the spring transfer window, like Carolina got better and they got deeper in some areas than they were a year ago with Mac Brown, or where they were when Belichick first got hired. And so I think, for a lot of us that still think he has his fastball, he'll be able to prove that, because if this team plays at a high level with 70 new faces on it, he'll be the one getting the majority of the credit for that.
Yeah, I think talent-wise, this roster is where it needs to be to compete. And I think it will, as you said, be a roster that will get better as the season goes along. It will be a team that will get better as the season goes along. And yes, that is incredibly refreshing because, under Mac Brown, it was basically start the year fast and then completely crap the bed when it mattered the most. I would hope that this is going to be the complete opposite of that. Now, what that could entail, that could entail a 2-2 start to the season. That could entail Carolina, losing to 2 teams out of the Big 12. And then, at one point in the season, we're saying to ourselves, oh, where is this going? Especially if they then lose to Clemson and you're sitting at 2-3. It's just, I'm trying to figure out what it exactly is going to look like. And I do think that there's multiple ways that it can go, but I think this roster is still very intriguing and brings about a reason to be confident. One of the reasons that you probably should be confident in this team is because defensively, they should be better than they were a year ago. One of the guys that was out there talking, Will Hardy, I asked him about the new defense. This is the 3rd defense that he's going to be in. I asked him how this defense differs from the ones that he was in prior to this one.
I think we're going to play faster, honestly. I think there's going to be less thinking and just the ability to play fast and fully understand the defense will make us a better unit. We've got great players on all 3 levels of the ball. I think the safeties specifically have freedom. I think our disguise are going to be really good. I genuinely think the offenses kind of won't know what to expect each and every play just because of how much we can change it up.
So, that's what he thinks is going to be the difference. I like what he's saying there. The thing is that we've been sold a bill of goods many times in the offseason about the defense looking different. But I do think that, the fact that they're going to be able to play a little bit freer, to me, that's going to allow them to be a little more aggressive. I feel like in the last few years under Mac Brown, the defense, once again, very similar to what happened with Larry Fedora, really became afraid of getting beat. And that was where that was how they played. They played scared at times. I don't think this defense is going to play scared, and I think that's going to lead to a much different looking unit this year.
What I found very interesting about that answer was how he says they're going to play freer and faster and not think so much. And all we heard the last few years was we're trying to simplify. And I guess in Will Hardy's eyes, it was not simplified enough. I do think Carolina is going to be more aggressive from word go. I do think this is going to be a team that's better at the point of attack. I do think this is going to be a team that's going to be more physical, and I do think this is going to be a team that's a lot more tougher than they have been the last handful of years we've watched this program struggle on the defensive side of the football. It's now like as much as any other unit on this roster, that's one of those where you got to prove before we can truly believe in it and buy into it, which is maybe not fair because you've got Bill Belichick, you got Steve Belichick working on that side of the ball. But when you are as scarred as we are defensively, where we've thought at different times that this program had really put their defensive issues behind them and then they give up 70 points to James Madison, or you have the issues that Carolina had against a Virginia or Georgia Tech, there is going to have to be some trust that is going to be built up. But I just think from top to bottom, Carolina's technique is going to be better. I think their fundamentals are going to be better. I think they're going to be more aggressive. And with that, it comes confidence. The reason why Carolina has struggled as much as they've struggled defensively was simply put, their players could not believe they could be good defensive players. Yep. Because at every turn they got told they weren't, which got proven to be true more often than not. But I do think there will be a confidence that will be instilled from this coaching staff. And you brought in some accomplished players on the defensive side of the football, like a Thad Dixon, a guy that can be first team All ACC, who have already established himself as a leader, and they're going to lead by example. And so it'll be fun to see what this defense looks like. They'll have their hands full in the season opener because they're playing against one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12 that the Big 12 has to offer. I just find it hard to believe that they're going to be as bad as they've been the last handful of years, given the coaching pedigree that exists on the sidelines. I could be wrong, but that would be, I think, the most disappointing thing this season is if with the Belichicks, specializing in that area, if we're watching this team struggle week in, week out to stop opposing offenses. When you look at the fact that outside of TCU, outside of Clemson, maybe a Darian Mensah at Duke, there aren't a long list of quarterbacks that should carve this defense up on a week in, week out basis.
Well, and Darian Mensah's numbers are very shockingly similar to Gio Lopez. So that's a guy that, a lot of people are really high on, but you never really know what exactly he's going to become. I think this defense is certainly poised for a step in the right direction. And cue all the jokes of, well, how can it really get much worse? Yeah, we know that it really can't get much worse for Carolina defensively. But I think you heard it right there from Will Hardy. It's going to be a defense where you don't necessarily have to think nearly as much. It's going to be a defense where there's going to be much more physicality. I mean, listen right to Thad Dixon. I asked him right out, what are the elements of a Steven Belichick defense? Like, what are the pillars that his defense is built on? And here's what he had to say.
Communication, hitting people. I mean, I just straight up hitting people in the mouth. I mean, it's a smash mouth defense. We put our front foot forward. We don't back down from nobody. So just being tough, smart, and dependable on the defensive side of the ball, communicating and consistent. Really just consistency. That's one of Coach Steve's, main thing is just being consistent. He doesn't like yo-yos. Can't be up one day, down the next day. So, we just want to keep moving steady upward.
Yeah, and look, we've had a lot of guys who have yo-yoed throughout their career at Carolina. That's been one of the things. Consistency has not been there for Carolina. Very hit and miss, especially in the defensive backfield at times. So that's something that Carolina, I think, is going to be better at this year. But the other thing that he brought up there, communication is something we've heard that be talked about for, the last 5-10 years about Carolina, that they have to be better at communicating back there. That's something I need to actually see it on the field before it happens. The thing that's different is this being talked about as a smash mouth defense. This being talked about as a physical defense. Man, we didn't hear that with the last coordinators. Everything was about communication. You heard, under Gene Chizik, it was about limiting big plays. That was really what Carolina was focused on. This is a unit that I think is going to be much different. They're going to have a much different mentality. The team as a whole will have a much different mentality, but especially this side of the ball where physicality is going to matter. If you cannot live up to the level of physicality that Carolina is bringing to the table this year, then you are simply not going to play. And I think that's going to be one of the other things that's going to be different. Yeah, Carolina may not have, as much talent or as much experience as they would like on the defensive side of the ball. There are some areas where they're lacking, but I don't think they're going to be afraid to rotate guys in, even if they might not necessarily be the most talented. If they're bringing that physicality and that right mindset to the table, that's what I think you'll see that's a lot different this year under Carolina. And look, everybody said for the last few years, your podcast, your blog site, name the wrong thing because Carolina is definitely not tough. Well, I think that's going to change under Steve Belichick. And you saw last year in his limited time at Washington, that was a defense that became one of the more physical in the Big Ten as the season went along.
Yeah, I learned that I have something in common with Steve Belichick. I myself, not a fan of yo-yos, could never figure them out as a kid growing up. That might have been the best answer I heard all day from all the different media sessions these guys did. Because there's an element that I want to see this team knock someone in the mouth, put someone on their ass like they did when I was a young Carolina football fan and Butch Davis was building Carolina into a team that before all hell broke loose was on the verge of competing for an ACC championship. Yes, the communication has to be better. I think the communication will be better because I don't think the staff will tolerate the lack of communication. That's still not as important as being physical at the point of attack. And I thought that was something that Jeff Collins was going to fix last year, and it was there, and then it disappeared. I don't think that's going to be something that'll wane from Carolina's identity. I think that's something that Bill Belichick is going to preach, and he's going to reiterate, and he's going to hammer every time that they talk in a team meeting, every time they get into practice, and every time they go into a game. That I think they want to be the more physical football team. They want to be the tougher football team because sometimes the more physical team, the tougher team, they beat the team with more talent. And that's something that Carolina can maybe ran into an issue in some of the games that they've lost, like the Georgia Tech games that derailed seasons. Carolina was more gifted, but those teams were more physical, and those teams wore Carolina down. I think Carolina wants to flip the script. I think they want to be the team that's wearing down their opponent. They want to be the team that's still standing tall in the fourth quarter. They're not with their hands over their hips, sucking for wind. And so when you got a guy like Thad Dixon that's kind of been through the wars that Washington has played in during his time there, I think it's easier for other guys to follow his lead because they know it's not all talk. They know that he's gonna say what he has to say. He's going to check. He's going to buckle his chin strap, and he's going to go put someone on their butt. And so hopefully that's something that is not all talk. We get to see that because I think that'll be a breath of fresh air for Carolina football fans, getting to see a team be physical and aggressive on that side of the ball.
Yeah, and I mean, when it comes to Thad Dixon, I don't think that you have to worry about him being a guy that's selling you a bill of goods. I don't think he's a guy that's going to be leading you astray in the wrong direction. He's a guy that's been in this system. He's a guy that knows what Steve Belichick is made of. There's a reason why he came over, and there's a reason why he's a vocal leader on this team. He has said that he is one of the guys that is demanding the excellence, the competition in the room. He's pushing guys to be the type of players that they need to be to fit in this system. And that is a sigh of relief. That is, something that is definitely needed for Carolina because, yeah, we're tired of being pushed around. I mean, it's just that simple. We're tired of teams like NC State, teams like Duke at certain times, some of these other teams that are towards the top of the conference pushing Carolina around, especially in the trenches. That's the area that it's got to change. Do I know that this year is the year that it for sure changes? I don't know that 100% because I feel like a lot of the guys that you brought in, are going to be guys that are going to take some time. They are guys that haven't necessarily produced at the highest level just yet, but you never know. There could be some guys that surprise. I believe in the Belichicks. I think that Steven is going to demand that this unit play the way that he wants to play, which is with a physical mindset. I think Bill Belichick is going to bring that NFL type of mentality where physicality is what matters the most on that side of the ball. If you bring that, then it's going to be intimidating for teams on the other side. I think that is certainly going to show through for Carolina. And I think even if that doesn't necessarily produce great results in year one, as long as this team shows that they're physical at the point of attack, that they can not get pushed around nearly as easily, which I think will lead to success just based off of that, then I think Carolina fans will be able to stomach whatever they actually see out there on the defensive side of the football. Throughout this roster, one of the things that was talked about was the level of competition that we saw out there. Here's Will Hardy. I thought this was really interesting when I was asking him about the level of competition in the secondary, and he said that it's really just the competition throughout the entire roster that surprised him.
It's been great. I think that's one of the biggest changes I've seen in this program is the level of competitiveness. It's pushing me every single day to compete with other safeties in the room. I know even outside of the DB room, every position is up for grabs. We've got new guys at every position. We've got new staff. And so there's not one position that's just locked because, you started somewhere else. You started here last year. Everything's got to be earned right now. It's really true. And so, it's just increasing everyone's level of play.
So I thought that was really interesting that he says that overall, that's the thing that shocked him the most is the increase in the overall level of competition on this team. Not saying that that's a shot at Mac Brown. I don't think that was intentional from Will Hardy, but it really does tell you that it's different than what was here before under Mac Brown, where it felt like you had certain guys that you knew were going to be able to start. You knew that there was a clear second tier on the team and that hopefully those were guys that would be able to contribute, but at certain positions never really did contribute. With this group, there's such a level of competitiveness. There's so many different areas on this team that we're looking at and saying, hey, there's a position battle there, which means you're going to see a lot of guys on the field this year, and it's going to demand excellence because if you don't live up to the expectations, you're not going to play.
Probably the biggest benefit of having 70 new faces on this roster is that it just naturally created competition. I mean, virtually at every single position group. Like, yes, you have some guys that are back that are going to be penciled in as starters, but for depth purposes and for the rotation purposes, I think they want to be intentional about. Well, you've got to figure out who those guys are going to be. You can say that it wasn't a direct shot at Mac Brown, but it was an indirect one. Because that's something that I do think that was something that was lacking. Like Mac Brown would talk every preseason about creating depth. We want competition every position. We want to, if guys, screw up and F up, we're going to take them out and replace them. And then we watched a guy like Des Evans jump off sides twice on one drive in a game against Charlotte, and there was no repercussion for it. I don't think that's going to be the same with Bill Belichick because there's going to be so much competition created where these guys, I think your backups and your rotation guys are going to be in a better position to play and perform than they were the last 5 to 6 years. And so I do think I appreciate that aspect of it. And I think it speaks volumes that, in just a short amount of time, Bill Belichick, it's like that's a culture change where there's just competition in every room. There's competition in every drill. It doesn't matter what you're doing. These guys, it feels like they want to compete because that's how you make each other better. That's how you get it better internally, and then it gets better externally when you take on a different opponent on the football field. So I thought that was maybe my second best answer I heard all day from Will Hardy. Because as someone that likes to compete in everything he does in life, I like hearing the fact that this team under this new regime has taken on the mantra that It doesn't matter what they're doing. They're going to beat their tails off.
Yeah, I mean, we're guys that like to compete when it comes to the podcast. You know that for sure. We're very competitive on that side, and that's the thing that we want to see is that level of competition throughout the entire roster. Because I was the idiot that would buy in every offseason when I was being told by Mac Brown, "Hey, we're going to be deeper this year. We're gonna play more guys at linebacker. We're gonna play. Hopefully, we're gonna be 10 men deep." On the offensive line, where if a guy struggles, then we're going to pull him out of there. Never happened. Where now I think, there's legitimate thought that, this could be a group that actually has that type of depth. And if it doesn't, then they're going to develop that type of depth. It's not going to be one of those things where they're just going to settle for the fact that they don't have depth there, that they're going to settle for the fact that certain guys on this team, they just have to live with whatever they give them. And that is what it is. No. You're going to be doing things the right way or you're going to be pulled out. And that was one thing that we didn't hear, but I do think that is going to shine through when we get in season. The level of discipline is going to be different. I would be stunned if this is one of those teams that is one of the, a team that struggles with penalties and stuff like that. That was never Bill Belichick's teams. They never struggled in that area. They were so fundamentally sound. I think you're going to see that again this year. And I was interested. I should have asked one of the guys at the podium about that. I know they were asked about it in film sessions about him holding them accountable. And they said there are many times where he will point out, to them, what are you doing on this play? Now, might be a couple of expletives in there as well. But that's something that, we've heard a lot. I've never heard them talk this much about watching film and about really being criticized for some of the mistakes that they're making and everything like that. It felt like Mac Brown, we talked about it. It was a program that really coddled players, where this is a program that now feels like it's not necessarily coddling players. It's demanding a level of excellence, and these guys have to live up to it. Last thing that I wanted to play here, this is another one from Will Hardy. And I thought this was very, very interesting because this sort of ties into one of the other storylines around ACC Kickoff that we'll touch on here really quickly. It's late on this edition of the show, so we are going to end up carrying over the SEC stuff into another edition of the podcast. We may touch on just our initial thoughts on it, give you a little preview. But Will Hardy, this was in the breakout session with the local media. He was talking about this upcoming year for Carolina and was talking about what he expects from the fan base this year and that he expects more.
Just the fans getting more involved this year is what somehow do good things.
Last year to this year.
Yeah, it's been good. It's been a lot of new good things. I think the crowd and the just the fans getting more involved this year is what something I'm looking forward to a lot. That first game against TCU is going to be really exciting Monday night on ESPN. And so, the tension's building, and we're looking forward to it. Excited to start fall camp soon.
How are the fans getting more involved? You just mentioned that.
Yeah, just like you said, like the ticket sales. Seeing that this early and every single game is already sold out. That's just one way. And I sort of expect some more coming this year just because of, what our team's going to bring, a lot of new and exciting stuff.
So, look, I don't think he was meaning to challenge the fan base there, but I think what he was saying was he expects there to be more fans there because of the excitement around the program. I'm the guy that's saying, hey, as fans, that should be a challenge to us to show up, to show out, to not bail on this team when the first sign of something going wrong happens. Because, early in the year, it could be a little bit of a bumpy road with all the new guys that are coming in, with all the newness just around the program in general, and the expectations that are going to be on the program right out of the gate. I think he's right that this year it makes sense to expect that there is going to be a different level of excitement around Carolina. And we saw that with the announcement on Wednesday that the team ended up selling out tickets for the entire season, not only season tickets, but individual game tickets on the website. Only place you can get them now is the secondary market. And the thing is that, when you look at it, this is the earliest that Carolina has ever sold out of tickets for a game. They did it with Mac Brown. That was one of the things that they really hung their hat on. But this is even earlier. There's even more hype around the program. And I think this is something that hopefully Carolina can build on this year on the field. But it's about the fans not only buying the tickets, but actually showing up on game day throughout the season.
Yeah, I have no problem with them challenging us as fans because we've earned the right to be challenged because when it comes to UNC football, it's fair weather. When they're winning, we show up. When we are losing, we don't show up. Well, we can't sit here and say we want to be taken seriously as a football school, but not support football through the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we are two guys that are as vocal as anyone that covers Carolina, does podcasts about Carolina, about winning in both and really excelling in both the football and the basketball side of things. We've had the chance to be at some pretty big-time games since we've become fans and become season ticket holders. We were there for the night game at home against Miami when Mac Brown first came back. I mean, we were in the stands the night that they were 9-1 against Georgia Tech, and we're on the doorstep of being a top 10 team in the college football playoff. We were in the building when they were 6-0 and ranked inside the top 10 of the AP poll. Nothing, I think, will compare to that environment Labor Day night. Like, from a spectacle standpoint, I don't even know what to expect. And just so you give you a peek behind the curtains about where our commitment is, I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to work. That game, if we're being lucky, will be over at 11:30. And then I'm driving back to be at work the next day to talk about said game. So I'm probably going to be working on about an hour of sleep that Tuesday, but there's no way in hell I'm missing that game. And there's no reason to not miss any game this team plays, whether they're 1-0, whether they're 5-0, or whether they're 2-5. Like, show up, show out, and support. That's what Bill Belichick demands. That's what Bill Belichick deserves. And I think the players deserve that as well because there's been an attitude adjustment that's taken place with inside the walls of the Keenan Football Center. So, when he got hired, the second that they put season tickets on sale, we got ours. And my expectation is that, we got 6 home games this year, that for 6 games, there's 52,000 fans in that stadium screaming their heads off and supporting this team, whether they're winning football games or whether they're struggling during their first year as Belichick adjusts to the college game. So I'm excited. That first game is going to be, I think, something that as Carolina fans will always remember, because how many times have we said that the entire football world is watching us? Mm-hmm. Hasn't happened quite that often. That night, the entire football world will be watching North Carolina football. And I'm pretty excited to be in the stadium, be a part of that, and just be a part of the atmosphere this year because, we want big-time football. Well, it's up to the fans to make big-time football happen, create a big-time football atmosphere, and that starts with the TCU opener on Labor Day night.
Well, that's the thing. Not only do you need to show up, I mean, if you're buying the tickets, put your ass in the seat. But at the same time, when you're there, be loud. Actually get into the game. Be focused on what's going on the field. And, this team is going to need support this year. It's okay to be critical at certain times during the game, to be pointing out that certain guys aren't doing what they need to be doing. We've done that as fans for years. But I do think that the thing is when it comes to important plays, when it comes to important downs, you need to be loud in Kenan Stadium. That's what needs to be the difference, because it's one thing to sell it out, but it's a different thing to create an actual environment on Saturdays. And I think this fan base is capable of doing it. I know this fan base is capable of doing it, because when you go back to that Miami game, that was as loud as we've ever heard Kenan Stadium. And we've heard Kenan Stadium pretty loud. The comeback against Pitt. We were not at the game against NC State when Gio returned the punt, but that was another one where that stadium got loud. I'm not saying it's got to be that loud on every single play, but you want to create some sort of environment, something that makes it difficult to walk into Kenan Stadium and play a game on Saturdays. The coach on the sidelines, I think, is going to be able to do that just because of who he is. The fan base needs to be able to help them out, and they don't need They don't need you to bail on them if they lose that first game of the season. I know how Tar Heel fans are. I know that next game is against Richmond. I don't care if it's raining. I don't care if it's raining sideways and we're in the middle of a hurricane. You need to show up. If the game is being played, you need to be in attendance. You need to show up because you know that some of the other fan bases in this state would show up during those types of conditions. You need to do the same as a Tar Heel fan. All right. So I mentioned there were some other storylines around Tar Heel football. We mentioned the opener, how big of a deal that's going to be. Well, college football countdown, not college game day, is coming to Chapel Hill. It'll be Matt Berry, along with Pat McAfee, Nick Saban, really a mixture of some of the college game day staff. Teddy Bruschi is actually going to be in attendance for that one as well. So it'll be a mixture of some of Belichick's former players, along with some college game day experts that are going to be on site for that one. You know, it's a big deal when they're bringing out Pete Thamel. He's actually going to be on site. So you know when they're bringing him out, that's when it's really a big deal for Carolina. And then you will have the crew for Labor Day that they normally roll out, which is not Chris Fowler. They usually do Reese Davis. They'll roll him out with Kirk Herbstreit, and Holly Rowe will be on the sideline. So this is a big deal, man. This is a big deal that Carolina gets this type of platform. We expected that something was going to be coming to Carolina. We thought maybe it would be ACC Huddle. It's not. It's actually big ESPN that's going to be there. So this is going to be a spectacle like we haven't seen before in Chapel Hill, because we, of course, weren't even alive. Or if we were, we were very, very young the last time that college game day came to Chapel Hill.
And it was that 97 season. I was barely a year old.
Yep.
You know, this was expected. This was anticipated. And no disrespect to the ACC Huddle crew. They did a great job this week at ACC Kickoff. This warrants what ESPN is doing. Also, what a great time for revenue sharing to be distributed about ratings and that playing a factor, because Carolina's going to be on ESPN as much and as often as possible. And I think that's just going to be another element that'll lead up to the kickoff. It's just knowing that pretty much every big personality that's in college football that covers the sport is going to be in Chapel Hill. That doesn't happen quite that often, folks. Mm-hmm. And so I think it'll just add to the moment of one of the more anticipated debuts we've seen in the history of college football. And now I think the next goal is getting actual college game day on campus for a Saturday home game. Not a Thursday game like that Florida State game was in 97, not college football countdown on the Monday night opener. It's getting the program to a point when game day is figuring out where they're going for whatever week it is in the season. They identify Chapel Hill as the best place to be. And I do think under Bill Belichick, that's as possible as it's ever been.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it's not impossible to think that it could be year one. You win the game against TCU, you comes to Chapel Hill. And look, we know ACC Huddle will eventually be there. We know they made the announcement that they will be going to the biggest game of the week. Every single week, doesn't matter if college game day is there. They will be on site for the biggest game. They will start with a trip down to Atlanta, or is it Atlanta? Yeah, I think it's Atlanta for LSU and Clemson. That'll be where they'll start. And at some point, Carolina is going to have them on campus, along with hopefully college game day at some point. That would be huge for Carolina if they could get it done in year one. If not, you would believe that at some point Carolina will be able to get college game day to campus. We've been involved in a college game day game here recently under Mac Brown with South Carolina, but it wasn't on campus in Chapel Hill, which is, I think, the biggest goal for everybody. All right, last thing that we'll touch on here. We're going to do a whole podcast just focused on this, and it makes sense because of how big the news is. Even though it might not be the newest news, even though there might not be anything here that really is that new, but it's the rumors that Carolina could be going to the SEC. These are reports from inside Carolina, not rumors, reports from inside Carolina that Carolina is starting to get to the advanced stages of pushing towards trying to get into the SEC. That this is something that is being spearheaded by the new group that is heading up things in Chapel Hill, the new chancellor, Lee Roberts, and of course, Steve Newmark, who will be the new athletic director taking over after Bubba Cunningham completes his tenure as athletic director this school year. I think this is something that we saw coming. We talked about this on the Four Corners side of things. I never got around to actually putting it on the Heel Tough blog channel, which, is unfortunate because it would have made perfect sense to throw up there. But it makes sense because Steve Newmark has worked with the SEC before. We thought that this was something that was going to be coming at some point, but I don't know if we thought that we would be getting reports this soon that Carolina is basically the school that is going to be spearheading the efforts to get out of the conference as the conference begins what will inevitably be its collapse in the late 2020s into the 2030s.
Yeah. Short story short, I'll reiterate what I said then. I'll make this comment again when we do the full episode. This, first off, is necessary. And I don't like, to me, it was not a coincidence when they made the announcement that Steve Newmark was coming and then we get this report 3 weeks after he gets hired. Because I think this is something that internally Bubba Cunningham knows is necessary. Does not want that to be a part of his legacy as the Carolina AD. Let's just hire a guy who has experience working in the SEC, and let that be something he does is move Carolina into that conference where they're definitely valued. That brand, I think, would do wonders in a conference that's all about brand power. It would elevate them, I think, to be as legitimate as a football program as they've ever been. Of course, we saw this past year in basketball, putting 14 teams in the NCAA tournament. And I'm going to be point blank with you folks. As someone that has fought against this for the last handful of years and damn near threatened to quit my college sports fandom if Carolina were to leave the ACC, you should be excited about this. I have come around. I will become the biggest SEC. It just means more pom-pom waving, you know what, when this becomes official. I want this. I think Carolina will benefit greatly from this. I think they will win at the highest levels. They'll make more money than they've ever made before, and it'll make Carolina one of the premier athletic institutions in all of college sports. So I know there's a lot of history and tradition in the ACC, where you've been the premier department in that conference since its arrival in the early 1950s. But sometimes you got to move on. And this is a marriage that has been very beneficial to both parties. But a younger, better-looking woman has come along that has more to offer. And it's time for us to go get with that better, younger-looking woman, kind of like Bill Belichick did with Jordan Hudson. So we'll talk about this more sometime later this weekend, but I'm excited about this because I think this only has big things to come for Carolina's future on the football and basketball playing surfaces.
Yeah, it's what's needed. It's a conference that right now is going to die at some point. And if you're Carolina, you don't want to be left without a life raft because you're holding on to a conference that is not going to last. We've said it multiple times. Jim Phillips seems like a nice guy, man. We have been around him. We've talked to him before. He seems like a lovely fella. He is a dude that is he is running this thing into the ground because he is, I don't know if this was on purpose, but he seems to be completely absent-minded. He does not seem to understand the situation that he is in where everybody is looking towards the future. He wants to focus on the now. He always wants to steer it back to what the conference is currently doing, to where the conference is currently at. We're not talking about the future. We're not looking at future negotiations, that kind of stuff. You need to look at that because every other conference commissioner is doing that, and they're doing it at a high rate. And it's led to success for them, at least in the power conferences. Even the Big 12, man, that got picked apart. Brett Yormark did what he had to do. And he's another guy that is never focused on the now. He's focused on the future. Jim Phillips is a guy that just seems to be the captain of a ship that's going down, and he doesn't know how to get off of it. Carolina is the team, is the brand that, you know, honestly is the biggest in the ACC. It's the one that the SEC is going to want the most because of the TV market. More importantly than anything, people will say, well, you know, Clemson, Florida State, because of what they are in football, their brands are bigger than Carolina's. You can believe that. You can. It's not true, but you can believe it. Carolina is the biggest brand, it may be in all of college sports. And that's the reason why they're going to eventually end up in the SEC. It's just a matter of when that is going to happen. And we'll talk about that all on another edition of the podcast later on this weekend. Guys, as we told you, it's going to be packed. We'll have that edition of the podcast. We'll have the running back preview edition of the podcast where we go through the running back room. Our position previews are going to keep rolling on. And it's only going to get, you know, more crazy as we get closer to the season, especially if we start getting stuff out of fall camp. Hopefully they do allow a little more access to the media. If they do, we'll have you covered both here on the podcast and over on the website, HeelToughBlog.com. You've seen it scrolling down there at the bottom of the page. So make sure that you do everything that is being talked about down there. Follow us on the social medias. That would really help us as well. And make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. There's going to be plenty of YouTube content for you guys coming up. You saw earlier today, we put out a clip of us talking about Gio Lopez from the quarterback preview. We're going to be doing that a lot moving forward, where we're going to break down some of those videos that we do, like the running backs. Like when we talk about Davian Goss, we will break that down into a specific video itself, and you guys will have just that video, but you'll also be able to catch the full edition in the description. So make sure you keep an eye out. Some great content that's going to be coming your way over the next couple of weeks on the Heel Tough Blog podcast side of things and over on the Heel Tough Blog YouTube page. So you don't want to miss that. And then on the website side of things, I didn't post one today, but I am going to post one tomorrow. Might actually double up this weekend with the position previews. The tight ends will be up next, and then we'll do the offensive line. So that really just sort of sets the tone for the podcast edition. So you don't want to miss any of those when they're on the website. And, of course, any other news, big recruiting stuff coming up this weekend. One of the Tar Heels' top targets at the defensive tackle spot is getting ready to announce his commitment in T.I. Umo Caius. We're going to have you covered on that front, no matter what happens on the website at HeelToughBlog.com. That'll be tomorrow, so make sure that you're keeping an eye on that. And any other news that comes out around the program, we will have you covered. Same thing on the basketball side of things. Going to be doing an edition of the podcast this weekend, talking about some news and notes from around the program. So, guys, it is crucial that you are on these social media pages, that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel so that you don't miss any of these great editions of these podcasts that we have coming up. You need to be there. And the best way to do it is by subscribing to those pages. So make sure that you do that. But that's going to wrap it up for tonight's edition of the show. Want to thank Josh for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.